Hi guys, this is part 2 in my interpretation of Daniel 7 and the possibility that it is being fulfilled like in real time, like right now. So I wanted to make this video because there were a few things that I forgot to say in the first video, and also I sent this video to a few people and just to kind of see what feedback there was. And so there were a few things that I realized that I needed to explain a little better, a little more better. So that's what I'm going to do. And also there's a few other things that I've come across since making the first video. So I'm going to add that in here too. Versus I thought about maybe scrapping the first video and making one big video, but you know, there's only 24 hours in a day and I'm one person. So I'm just going to, like, as I come across more information, I'm just going to make a subsequent video. So this is part 2. All right. So if you remember in my first video, I pointed out that this first verse gives us a date when this vision was given to Daniel, and the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, is somewhere around 550 BC. So this entire chapter was given to Daniel 2,500 years ago. And that is significant in the fact of God's sovereignty and omniscience, and the fact that these things have been preordained. Like with God, they've been preordained since the beginning, before the beginning of time, right? He's known everything all the time, ever since forever, right? But in terms of humanity, we've had these prophecies to look at for 2,500 years. And so that just, you know, to me, that speaks to the fact that God's got everything under control. So ultimately, I say that because I know that when we get starting to talk about the beast and the Antichrist and stuff, it can get a little scary. But if you're a Christian and you truly believe that God is who he says he is, you don't need to be scared, okay? These things, obviously, okay, when we talk about comfort in our modern mind, we talk about a life not having any struggles. And that's not what comfort means. Comfort means that ultimately you know that God has everything under control, right? So, in other words, I heard a statement the other day that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the fact that you don't let fear stop you. You know, God doesn't save you to make your life easy. He saves you so that you can become stronger in the face of struggles. So don't be afraid. All of these things have been set down for a very long, long time, and they've been preordained. And again, I do have to caveat this all by my interpretation might be wrong. But the reason I'm making these videos is because I'm seeing things happen on the world stage that seem to be in line with the details of this passage. And I feel like it's important to get this information out there so that we can be on top of it, okay? Just like the descendants of Issachar in 1 Chronicles 12:32. The descendants of Issachar. Issachar was one of Jacob's sons and subsequently became a tribe of Israel. So the descendants of Issachar at this time were men who understood the times and what Israel should do. And they actually became like leaders because they were able to discern the times. And that's what God's people should always be in this example of the descendants of Issachar. We need to be on top of things, not just letting the world events take us by surprise. Right? We've had scripture for how long? We need to be taking these things in, and when it appears prophecy is coming about, we need to at least discern it and at least look at it. So that's my purpose for making these videos. All right, so some information that I didn't talk about last time is, I don't know, looking at verse 2, I don't know that this is true, but I just was thinking, I was thinking about the four winds again. And remember, the word wind is ruach, which can be interpreted as spirit. So these are four winds of heaven as opposed to four winds on the earth. And so these are spiritual beings that strive upon the great sea. And if you look at Revelation 13, you will see that the beast, which is this guy right here, in verse 7, the beast, he comes out of the abyss. And so then if you look at Revelation 17:15, you find out what the abyss is. The great sea, it has the many waters, it says, are the peoples, the multitudes, and nations. Okay, so you have the four winds that are bringing about these four beasts, and it's happening to this great sea, okay? They're bringing the four beasts upon the great sea. And so, again, I don't know what the four winds means, but it kind of makes me think about the four archangels. And I just say that because I happen to know that we know the names of four of them. Of course, there's Michael and Gabriel from the Bible. Michael, the archangel who ultimately defeats Satan. And then Gabriel is the one who announced to Mary that she would be the mother of God. But then in the book of Enoch, so Michael and Gabriel are mentioned in the 66 canonical books of Scripture. But Raphael and Uriel are in the book of Enoch. They're also mentioned. And I don't know that they're the four winds, but I do know that archangels are kind of like the ones who get things done in the company of heaven. So I don't know that that really helps you understand the passage more or less, because it might not even be true, but it just made me think of that. Also, we don't know that there are necessarily only four archangels. There may be more than that. Anyway, that's just something that popped into my head. All right, so then moving on. Something that I needed to clarify in the last video, when we're talking about these four great beasts, because some people were saying, well, how do you know it's Trump, Putin, and Xi? It might be some obscure person that we don't know about. Could be the lion, and another one could be the bear, and the leopard, tiger, whatever it is. Like, how do you know it's them? Well, I know that it's prominent people because of verse 17. I didn't point this out in the last video, but it says, these great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. Okay? Kings are really prominent people on the world stage. So that is what I'm also looking at as criteria for discerning who these people are. They're four kings, four prominent people. All right, so they're not going to just be little obscure people until the moment of prophecy coming about. Okay, these are going to be signs that you can see because they are prominent enough to see them. I had a few people asking a question about why I thought that Trump was a lion, and the fact that the Lion of Judah is a stretch, because they didn't believe me when I said that Trump is in the line of Judah. Okay, so I wanted to clarify that and kind of tell you where I'm coming from. First of all, you need to understand how ancestry works, okay? And I recently became interested in my own personal ancestry a few years ago with the advent of things like Ancestry.com and DNA tracking and things like that, because I never knew my two grandfathers, and my parents actually didn't even know their fathers. So I just had these gaping holes in my heritage that I never knew anything about until I was able to join Ancestry.com. And in so doing, I was able to track back my lineage, my personal lineage, and I actually found where my mother, on my mother's side, I found a leg of her family tree that you can track all the way back to Charlemagne. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm really cool because I'm in this like kingly line of Charlemagne who lived in the 500s AD. And I thought I was something for like 5 minutes. He's like my 46th great-grandfather or something like that. Anyway, in doing a little more research, I came across this article written by a journalist who had investigated the very same thing, because she had come across Charlemagne in her ancestry. And lo and behold, through her investigation, she realized that it turns out that if you are white, you are most likely related to Charlemagne at some point in your ancestry. And the reason is because, how can I put this delicately? Charlemagne was sexually prolific. Let's just say it that way. And so he had many, many offspring as a result. And thinking back to in the 500s, there weren't nearly as many people on the planet as there are now. So odds are that if you are white, you are related to Charlemagne at some point. Because think about, okay, you have two parents. Both of them have two parents. Both of them have two parents. And then you go back like every 20, 30 years is another generation of more and more parents. Like the way family trees work, we are related to millions of people, right? Millions of ancestors. So I say that to say, and it's the year 2022, so 1,500 years ago is enough time for all white people to be related to Charlemagne. Do you realize that Judah was alive 1,500 years before Christ? Or another way to say that, Judah was alive a full 2,000 years before Charlemagne. In other words, you have 3,500 years of heritage from Judah until now. So there's a lot of people related to Judah, okay? So think about that. But also, it's worthwhile to talk about, because I brought that up just to kind of see who would take the bait and think about it. And there's this article, it says Trump is more Jewish than Netanyahu. Anyway, if you read this article, it goes through who the people of Israel are. Like, the Israelites didn't just stay in Israel. Like, there were several different captivities and diasporas of the people where they were spread all over the place. Okay? And so there is one specific line of Judah through the line of King Zedekiah, and he had two daughters who were Skoda and Tehatepi. And the way that the story goes is that Tehatepi actually Tehatepi and Skoda were both taken to the British Isles by Jeremiah, and they were able to set up a monarchy in the British Isles that continues today. And so everyone in the kingly line, because there was a prophecy that God gave, and I can't remember where it's at, but he said that the line of Judah would never, the kingly line of Judah would never go away from the earth until Jesus comes back, the Messiah comes back. Okay, so that has continued through the British line of royalty. Anyway, so that's where I'm coming from, and it's a whole thing. Like, you need to look into it yourself, because I realize that this might be new information. And part of the reason too is because the Romans, when they took over, they kind of like destroyed the people that they took over. They kind of destroyed their histories and just wrote about them as being tribal people that didn't have any heritage. Like, the Gaels, the Celts, the Picts, the Anglos, the Saxons were all just these tribal people that they happened to come across whenever they were conquesting. But like even Robert the Bruce and like people like him, they understood that they were descendants of Israel. And another thing you can look up is the Declaration of Arbroath. People understood who they were. But also keep in mind too, the Bible says over and over that Israel is a people that forgets who they are. So the fact that this information is lost to a lot of people is actually fulfillment of the prophecy that Israel forgets. Or not the prophecy, but the inevitability that Israel forgets who they are. So remember who you are and look this stuff up. Anyway, all that to say, bringing you to this paragraph here. Donald J. Trump's mother, and I mentioned her in the last video, Mary MacLeod, or some people say MacLeod, is from the clan MacLeod, which means son of, and she is a descendant of the red hand of Judah Zara. That's a specific branch of the Judah line. And they are a Scottish clan who migrated to and settled in the Hebrides, which are also known as Hebrews Isles, on the Isle of Lewis. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from, and you can look this stuff up. I'm not just making that up, okay? Also, talking about, I had mentioned too the eagle's wings in like America being in the what is it? Being an iteration of the tribe of Manasseh. So where I got that from was like if you look at the tribes of Israel, they all had different symbols that they were associated with. So here you can see Judah, the lion, okay, Lion of Kings. And then Joseph, remember Joseph's not a tribe, but he's symbolized by the wheat, and Manasseh is symbolized by the arrows, and the eagle on the American seal has wheat and arrows in its talons. There's a significance to that, and it has to do with the line of Joseph and Manasseh. Okay, so I'm bringing that to your attention, hoping that you will actually look into it, because this video will be like 3 hours long if I talk about all of that, but I'm bringing it to your attention. All right. Okay, one last thing about the lion. You know, you might not even believe what I'm saying about Trump being in the line of Judah and it being symbolized by a lion. That's fine. But maybe you'll find this interesting. You know, Trump and his Make America Great Again, right? So let's just look and see, what is the symbol for MAGA? Oh, what animal is that? It is a lion. Okay, so, I mean, I'm not just pulling these things out of my butt, okay? Like, Trump is a lion, he's symbolized by a lion, and he's not a lion, he's like a lion, guys, okay? So, I think I've given you enough things to go on to make the connection that Trump is a lion in this verse, or could be, very likely, and that he's taken on eagle's wings, becoming the president of America. And I realized too that the word eagle might not actually mean eagle. It could mean vulture, and it could mean griffin. But in terms of kings on the world stage, there's no nation that has a vulture associated with it, and the only modern association to a griffin would be probably from Harry Potter, and the rest of the verse has nothing to do with Harry Potter. So I think we can go with eagle's wings being, and I think it's not a stretch to talk about the American presidency, especially since we know that Trump's wings were plucked off. He didn't just lose them, they didn't just fall off, but they were plucked off. The election was stolen, okay? And then he was lifted up from the earth. He didn't take it lying down. He stood up on his feet like a man. He took it like a man, right? And I went through all that in the last video. I wanted to talk about one more thing about a man's heart was given to it. We know that, well, before Trump became president, there's tons of accounts of him being a do-gooder, of like just driving through the streets of New York in his limo and stopping the car and giving money to homeless people. I mean, whenever you hear the word philanthropist, you know, we hear that George Soros is a philanthropist and that Bill Gates is a philanthropist. But all these men do is try to control our lives. Like, I think it's interesting that it specifically says a man's heart is given to this lion when we know that Trump has been a do-gooder for a long time. Like, even if you don't believe, because these stories about him driving through New York and helping people are hearsay, right? So maybe you don't believe that. Go to old clips of Oprah. Like, she would have people on her show where they are dealing with cancer or they can't afford to pay for their house. And like, Trump called in multiple times and he would like pay people's mortgages off and pay their hospital bills. And some of the time he would just do it and they would find out later that it was him, you know? So I think that's interesting in light of the fact that a man's heart is given to it, because thinking about other elites don't just do good like that. And this doesn't mean that he's perfect, and it doesn't mean that, like, you know, he's the second coming of Christ or something, but I don't understand why Trump would have to be the second coming of Christ to just be a man who has a heart, you know? Like, you don't even have to be a Christian to have a heart, because you have a God-shaped hole, and like you have a conscience. It's God-given. You're created in the image of God. And anyway, you can have empathy and sympathy for your fellow man without, you know, having perfection. But also it makes me think of Trump rallies, where if you've ever been to a Trump rally or seen a Trump rally, you know that there's certain things that the crowd chants at certain times. So like whenever Trump brings up Hillary, the crowd will chant, lock her up, lock her up. It happens every time, right? These are just things that you have to do when you go to a Trump rally. But another thing that people always break into is whenever he gets a little sentimental in his speech about America, the people will start chanting, we love you, we love you. And this is really actually unique, because this has no other politician has ever had people chanting that they love him the way they do at Trump rallies. This doesn't mean that you have to love him. I'm just saying what is, okay? I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying there is an overwhelming love for the man. There's also an overwhelming hate for the man, like Trump derangement syndrome. So that can kind of show you man's heart. Man's heart is this man is a watershed, okay? You either love him or you hate him. But love and hate are both heart emotions, right? They both come from the heart. So that's another thing to think about. Also, you know, the word could also be translated mind. And we know that he's a very shrewd businessman. He's written the book, The Art of the Deal. He's well-versed in Sun Tzu's Art of War. You know, he lost everything in the 90s and went completely bankrupt and built himself back up from nothing. And so he has a mind as well for that kind of thing. So those are just more things that I was thinking about. All right, I don't have anything really to add to the Putin stuff yet. So if you have something, please let me know. Or, you know, let's just keep our eyes open on that one. But as far as the Xi Jinping and China, I wanted to clarify too why I am calling the leopard a tiger here. And I know for some people it seems like I'm stretching. Okay, so this is why. All right, look at the usage of this word. It's used one time, and it's in this one verse, okay? When a word is used one time, it's kind of because the translators don't know how to translate it, and so they're going based on context and by words that are similar, okay? So when we look at this, like the word here is namar, okay? When we look at a word that's similar to it is namer or namare, and this word means leopard. It's used a few more times, but it's also it's an animal with a spot, stain, or stripe. So it could be a leopard, but there's no word in Hebrew for, or at least not in the Old Testament, for tiger. Okay? So if this verse is talking about a tiger, you're not going to know it, because the translators would have no reason to say tiger. Okay? So I know it sounds like I'm grasping, but it's only used one time. So even if this second word is leopard, this word is namare, and the word in question is nemar. Okay? So this is a different animal that is like a leopard. Do you hear what I'm saying? That's where I'm coming from. Also, the fact that in light of, again, verse 17, these are 4 kings. And I know that the leopard is like a symbol for Greece, but Greece is not a prominent player on the world stage. It might become one, and in which case, then maybe verse 6 is talking about Greece. But until I have reason to believe that, I'm just going to go ahead and interpret this word as tiger. And I hope that you understand why. All right. Now, so let's assume that this is the word tiger. I found some more things out about the tiger. All right. Also thinking about the fact that, yes, I know that China's national animal is the panda, but do you know that the panda was not even China's national animal until 1961? So it's only been the national animal for like 60 years. Much longer than that, the tiger has been a notable animal in China. And so now I'm going to talk to you about the 4 sacred animals of Chinese mythology. So you remember when I was talking about the zodiac is the yearly animal. There are 12 animals in the Chinese zodiac, and they go by the lunar year versus the solar year. We go by a solar calendar, and they go by a lunar calendar. And every new year, on this lunar new year, the year changes to a different animal. And as I showed you in the last video, right now we are in the Chinese year of the tiger. Okay, so even though it's not the national animal, this is the year of the tiger. But let's look at also every year on the Chinese calendar is divided into 4 seasons, right? Every year is divided into 4 seasons. And according to Chinese tradition, each of those seasons is overseen by a sacred animal. So those 4 sacred animals are the azure dragon, which is in charge of the spring, the vermilion bird or the phoenix, which is in charge of the summer, the white tiger, which is in charge of the autumn, and the black turtle, which is in charge of the winter. Now, going back to the white tiger, I found this the other day, and it's really interesting. Okay, it's known as the Bai Hu, and the Bai Hu is in charge of the west sky and is also the symbol of power, authority, bravery, loyalty, and justice, and in Chinese mythology is often believed as the god of war. Listen to this. This is why we often see the white tiger in the military flag and seal in China. So it's not the national animal, but it is the animal symbolizing the military of China, which makes a lot more sense in light of these 4 wings of a fowl. Remember the ancient Chinese expression, adding wings to the tiger, is when it means to double your efforts. And in this verse, it says 4 wings of a fowl, which means that the efforts are going to be quadrupled. And I don't know that this is true, but this makes me think of Revelation 9, where it talks about the army that has 200 million soldiers. A lot of people believe that they come from the east. I mean, I've heard people talk about the fact that they think that this might be China. It also is interesting that these soldiers are wearing red like fire, blue like sky, and yellow like sulfur, because the Chinese flag is red with 5 yellow stars, and we know that the UN soldiers wear blue. So, I mean, I don't know that this is connected, but this is just what it makes me think about. So thinking again about adding those 4 wings. So instead of doubling, you're quadrupling or exponentially increasing. If you have 200 million soldiers, I just kind of looked up how many soldiers that the Chinese military have. And in 2019, they have 2.5 million people. So that's not 200 million. But if you add wings to that tiger, and especially if you add multiple wings to the tiger, is that denoting the 200 million? I mean, I don't know. I'm just, again, spitballing. I wanted to say something else about the 4 heads, because I realized I kind of need to clarify this. In America, when the president becomes the president, we know that he becomes the head of the executive branch, but he also becomes the commander-in-chief of the military. He also becomes, he wears different hats. But all of those hats are still attributed to the president. The reason I pointed out the 4 heads of Xi Jinping, like being the head of 4 different roles in the Chinese government, is the fact that I don't think the Chinese presidency works the same way. I think he actually has taken on 4 separate roles of government, in which case that would make him having 4 heads and not just wearing 4 different hats that come along with the role of president. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. One last little statement here is that dominion was given to it. In the last video, I mentioned that China is the world's most populous country, and so dominion has the connotation with sovereignty, and sovereignty has to do with people. But then it made me think about those 200 million soldiers, or at least the fact that the tiger is the symbol of military, and you're like adding wings to that military, you're doubling down the efforts and power of it. So it made me wonder if for a period of time, because I've heard for like several decades that whenever America declines as the world superpower, that China is the next one to take over. So I'm wondering if maybe this means that China is given dominion and becomes the superpower for like 5 minutes before the Antichrist comes on the scene. So I don't know if that's what that means. I'm just wondering. One last little thing about dominion. In the last video, I had mentioned about dominion voting and how China interfered with our elections, allegedly, but also there's a lot of reason to believe it. So if you have ever seen the movie 2000 Mules, that was a movie put out about a bunch of mules that were paid to harvest ballots and then stuff ballot boxes. And the reason that they know that is because they were able to get the geo-tracking data. And the organization that got that tracking data was called True the Vote. Well, True the Vote is not just in the business of tracking down geo-tracking stuff. That's just one of the things that they were doing, trying to protect our elections. Something else that they came across is the fact that we have a database for all of our poll workers at every election station, people that work the machines and that help people sign in and help people vote and stuff like that. All of our poll workers have to sign into a software called Konnech, Konnech. Well, a few months ago, Catherine Engelbrecht and Greg Phillips from True the Vote discovered that Konnech, that their servers for this database are located in China, which is a huge breach of our national security and our elections. And Konnech actually sued them for libel and, or I don't know if it was libel, but they sued them for saying, how dare you say that about us? It's not true. Well, it turns out that the CEO of Konnech was just arrested a few days ago. And I bring that up to say that it's looking more and more like, yes, China definitely has interfered in our elections and is definitely interfering in our elections. So, that just makes me think about that in talking about dominion being given to it. All right, so that's what I found so far, and that's what this video is about. Thank you for listening, and I hope it helps you. And even if it doesn't, I hope it makes you at least think about something else. Because if I'm wrong, maybe you know the actual answer. Maybe I've triggered something in your brain to say, oh, that's not right, but I do know what is right. In which case, I would love to hear from you, because I know I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to understand stuff. So thank you for watching, and I will maybe make another video. Who knows? Bye.